do our best to answer them. First, I'll talk a little bit about Maygen and Emily. My first experience with Maygen and Emily was through an Atlas Obscura program on deep time, the Earth, and US national parks. And as a sidebar, if you don't know about Atlas Obscura, check them out. The programming is always fascinating and fun. I've been going to them since March now, and they do an amazing job. So when I went to this program that Emily and Maygen were hosting, they and the program was everything was incredibly engaging and educational. And ultimately for me, it was inspirational. The program deepened my love and respect of nature and the earth and the history. And it led me to think about how this kind of program could inspire us to be more energized in our own climate activism. As the authors of Scenic Science at the National Parks, I don't have my copy with me. It's a great book, but I believe Maygen might have a copy. Maygen, Keller, and Emily Hoff have spent years traveling and researching the incredible science that exists all over national parks across the US. When they aren't writing books, you can find them leading astrotourism trips, and I'd love to hear about that later. Musings and podcasts about our remarkable planet, and dreaming up new ways to experience scientific wonders in the world. Joining Maygen and Emily this evening is Geoffrey Supran. I had the pleasure and honor of knowing Geoffrey while he was a doctoral student at MIT, and we worked on a number of environmental activist activities. Now he's a research associate in the Department of History at Harvard University, and he works with Professor Naomi Oreskes, investigating the history of global warming politics, particularly the climate communications, denial, and delay tactics of the fossil fuel industry. He's also a postdoctoral affiliate at the Institute for Data, Systems, and Society at MIT. Maygen, Emily, Geoffrey, thank you for being here. And Maygen and Emily, I'll let you take it away.
Take it away. Thank you so much, Trish, if I may call you Trish on the Zoom. It's so wonderful to be here, and I need to drive this train with my screen sharing, so let's do it.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just echo that. Thanks for having us here, Trish. And Geoffrey, we're delighted to get you to be in on this a little bit later. And for now, hopefully Maygen and I have some interesting things to say today.
We do. We have so many interesting things to say. My screen is not letting me share. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Can you see?
Yes, but not correctly.
It's very big.
There we go.
But now it's correct.
Now it's correct.
See, you just can't panic on Zoom. So it's us. To give a little more introduction to who we are and what we do, we have a little deck prepared for our intro. So like Trish so kindly said, we are the authors of the book, Scenic Science of the National Parks. Here it is. You can buy it at your favorite indie bookseller anywhere. They will ship it to you. Please support your local bookstores. But it's a guide to science in the national parks. So plants, animals, rocks, the night sky. So to that astrotourism point, bodies of water in 60 national parks. And you have space for your passport stamps for anyone who's a national parks enthusiast. Fun illustrations will help you really learn to read and uncover the landscape. And in writing this book, we got to travel all over the country's national parks. So from Acadia to Arches to Yellowstone and Zion. And we took pictures at every single park. So if you're ever bored on Instagram, feel free to look through our pictures. And we really, while we were traveling, we're working on the concept of science tourism. So what would it be like to travel the country, and specifically the country's national parks, and engage in the landscape in a new way, really using science as our lens to view these landscapes through. So we had a heck of a time. We drove over or almost, I think almost 20,000 miles, some wild amount of mileage over the period of several years. We ate a lot of unhealthy food and saw incredible, awe-inspiring things throughout the national parks. And so all of that is to say, like I said, we really viewed it all through the lens of science tourism. And one of those lenses, one of the many lenses that we viewed the landscapes through was deep time, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. And so I think, Emmy, you could take it away.
Yeah, so thank you, Maygen, for that lovely introduction. What is deep time? What do we mean when we talk about deep time? Pretty simply put, deep time is the entire stretch of time from the beginning of time, that is to say the Big Bang as we understand it, up until this very moment. We're talking about billions of years. It's extremely difficult to comprehend because our human brains don't really think that way, and so often contextualizing it into a way that we can think about helps, into a time scale that we do understand helps. So if we were to compress the billions of years of history from the Big Bang until this very moment into a year-long calendar, this is something of what it might look like. In January, we have the Big Bang and the first stars. In February and April, the universe is cooking. In May, we have the first wisp of the Milky Way. June through August, there's just sort of more universe cooking going on here. It isn't until September that our solar system forms. And it isn't until December that multicellular life comes into being. The dinos wouldn't appear on this scale until around Christmas, and the mammals show up the day after. And modern humans don't evolve until 11:52 p.m. on December 31st. And every single bit of history that we know from written records happens within the last few seconds of this theoretical year. So another way that can be helpful to think about deep time is to think about it in physical terms. Our book is about 1 inch tall. And so if we were to stack up our books, if 1 inch represented 1 year, so one of our books is about 1 year, a stack of our books representing 500 million years would stretch from New York, where I live, to Cape Town, South Africa. And in order to represent the entirety of the history of Earth's 4.6 billion year existence, the stack would wrap 3 times around our equator. All of which is to say that even when you try to comprehend deep time, you actually just end up getting your mind more blown. So where exactly does that leave us? Well, it leaves us kind of making these faces. This was the authentic moment that we drove into Badlands National Park for the first time together, captured by a GoPro on our dashboard, absolutely getting our minds melted. So even though deep time is really difficult to understand, if you know what you're looking for, it's possible to read snippets of it in the landscape wherever you are. This doesn't just apply to national parks, but they sure are a fun place to do it. And when Maygen and I were first developing our concept about science tourism and thinking maybe we wanted to write a book about this, we could think of nothing better than to head into the field and just try it out for the first time. And Badlands was where we ended up. So it has always held a very special place in our hearts.
Yeah, so now that deep time makes sense to everybody.
Totally.
I always laugh when we try to explain it, and it's like, we don't actually get it either. You have everyone, it's a mess. But there is really no sweeter no sweeter park in our hearts than Badlands. It was the first park that we actually did all of the science tourism kind of beta testing in, and it is a wondrous place. So if you ever have the opportunity to visit, like, by all means do it. It is in South Dakota. Actually, this is a map from our book, in case you were wondering. It's in South Dakota on the land of actually many indigenous people who are still there today, serving as the land stewards that they always have. And so that's just an important thing to remember. The Pine Ridge Nation is actually right towards they co-administrate
They co-administrate
the southern unit of the park. So visitation is just under 1 million as of 2019, and it's known for Badlands, which is funny.
What are Badlands?
It's helpful when you tell people something's funny. Badlands are arid regions of land where soft rock is eroded into strange shapes by wind and water. And so when you go to Badlands, do I have a picture? I have a picture. Weird. I have a picture of us at the entrance.
Oh, that's so sweet.
When you go to Badlands National Park, it seems otherworldly. And it's because of that erosion that has been happening over thousands and thousands of years, which we'll talk about in a moment. Here's a lovely picture that Emily Hoff took. And I also think it's worth noting before I let her talk, it's worth noting that Badlands is an open hike park, which means when you go as a visitor, you aren't restricted to staying specifically on certain trails. As long as it's safe and feels safe for you, they have a policy where you can hike and explore wherever you see fit. Now that does have its challenges because, like I said, it's eroding really, really rapidly. So it can get dangerous. Obviously the rock is kind of crumbling beneath you. Every time it rains, you can see drastic changes in the landscape. So it's important to be safe, but it is a rare park in that you really don't have any restrictions in terms of where you can go as long as you're treating the land well and being safe. So take it away,
So this is what Badlands is divided into 2 units, northern unit and the southern stronghold unit on the Pine Ridge. We're going to focus on the northern unit because that is where the main developed areas of the park are. Most people enter towards the right side of your screen. You can see it says Ben Rifle Visitor Center. Most people come in that way and drive this, it's called the Loop Road, that will basically take you through the heart of the park and the heart of what Badlands National Park, which is known for, which is indeed Badlands, these eroding stretches of terrain. And most of this is actually fairly young, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But for now, I want to start us way, way back. If you drive all the way to the end of the Loop Road, you will encounter a place called Sage Creek. And Sage Creek is home to some of the oldest rocks, actually the oldest rocks in the park. They come in between 75 and 69 million years old. It's known as the Pier Shale. And I think we have a picture of it. Indeed, these darker rocks, that's black, almost green, that underlie all of the other formations in the park, peek out in just a few places, and Sage Creek is one of them. This rock, the Pier Shale, is the remnant of a vast ancient seaway, which is actually my second favorite ancient seaway, for those of you keeping score at home. This is that seaway. It's known as the Western Interior Seaway, and this is a view of Earth about 90 million years ago, so a little older than the Pier Shale, but about the same thing is going on. So the Western Interior Seaway was this vast stretch of sea that stretched from the Arctic to the Gulf of Mexico. It persisted for millions of years. Most of it was warm and shallow, almost tropical, but stretches of it were hundreds of meters deep as well. It effectively cut North America in two. And it was around for quite a long time until the Rockies rose to the west and drained it off. The muck at the bottom of that seaway is what eventually turned into the Pier Shale. Now, if you look closely in this picture, you can kind of see these little like white specks on that big hillside. Oh yeah, get that cursor in there. Those specks, we have a closer picture of them. Those specks are limestone nodules that form around marine fossils in the Pier Shale. So the Pier Shale is one source of really dope fossils from this stretch of time right before the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs. Some of my favorite fossils from this layer include creatures known as mosasaurs. They look like this. Some of them are up to 50 feet long. That's like the size of a bus. They're giant reptiles that swim underwater and chomp on whatever they please. In this photo, oh, sorry, not a photo, wow. In this drawing, wouldn't that be something? It is the mosasaur is eating what's known as a baculite, which is a straight-shelled ammonite. It's kind of like a squid or an octopus, but with a really long, straight shell. I think they're hilarious looking. Other fossils you might find in the Pier Shale include coiled ammonites. This bad boy happens to be about 3.5, almost 4 feet across. And the things that live in here are amazing creatures. Some of the relatives are still alive today, but no ammonites persist in this way. So at the end of this, towards like 69 million years ago or so, as the Rockies start to rise, the seaway dries out, and all of the muck that's on the floor either gets buried and turned into the shale, or it stays at the surface and weathers into this really amazing, very fertile soil as the land dries out and the climate heats up. And I wonder if there are any places in the park that you could like see that next phase of it, Maygen.
Interesting. There are. And you can see it kind of in the middle of the park, or I guess of the northern unit of the park, at Yellow Mounds. And so to look at the planet at that point in time, you can see pretty drastic difference that there's not a massive seaway cutting through the planet or cutting through the continent anymore. So now we're at about 50 million years ago during the Eocene epoch or epoch, depending on where you are geographically. I like to say epoch, even though apparently that's not the US American way to say it, but I digress. So we are in the Yellow Mounds area of the park. 50 million years ago, this would have been a fertile jungle with massive, presumably massive trees shooting out of the soils. So what you can notice here, and again, if you remember back to what we were just looking at with the pure shale, it looks drastically different. The colors in the rocks here are the most vibrant colors in all of the park. And it's something that you really notice when you're there. It stands out as a marked difference. I think the biggest thing to recognize is that all of the Badlands look remarkable, but once you start looking closer, you can really start to see the differences in the rock, and that really starts to be what tells you the stories of when you are as you're driving along the main road. And so these colors, which are gonna just kind of swing through, I forgot my little moment, dang it. So there's a little car here for scale, and I even forgot to say it, so there's a circle here, just to give you an idea of the scale of these mounds. Anyway, I ruined it. So the colors in the rocks tell the story. They are called paleosols, and they are fossilized soils. And the colors actually mean something, which is not surprising because of course they do. So the colors on the top are from the early Eocene, so the yellow and orange, they're from the early Eocene when like Emmy said, the Rockies were forming, the non-avian dinos were extinct, the Western Interior Seaway had drained, and leaving this fertile muck where essentially like jungles with large trees could grow out of them. And then the soil on top of that, so the red and purple layers that are above the yellow layers represent a bit younger period of time when the pools of water were replaced with streams and rivers moving across a plain. And so the landscape was continuing to change. So some ways that scientists know some of this is not with the body fossils that I think Emmy's going to get into a little bit later as well, where you see like bones and limbs and those kinds of things. The fossils that we find in these layers are actually fossils of root structures. And so that's how we know what was growing out of these soils. It's also worth noting that these soils were not these colors in that period of time. That happened over the erosion period of millions and millions of years. So the red layers, it's also just fun to note that we know that this is indicative of a well-drained and aerated condition, meaning that the soil was heavily oxygenated and it caused the soil to rust essentially, so turning the color red. So yeah, I think we should just look at the pictures. It's hard to drive the train when you're talking about what you're seeing. I don't know how like tourist people do that in real life, but anyway, you can see the layers here that I was talking about, you know, the yellows and the oranges. And I also wanted to use this photo to kind of conclude this Yellow Mounds portion because you can see the colors in the rock here again, but you can also see in the distance these much different sharp and pointy bits that we haven't yet talked about. And so I'm wondering what those are called, what they are, what they tell us, because I would imagine it's not the same as these heavily eroded mounds.
No, you're right. So just above those mounds sits a formation called the Bron Formation, which erodes into the sharp pinnacles and spires that make up a lot of the characteristic scenery in the park. And the rocks, specifically are as old, about 34 to 30 million years ago. This is what that looks like in real time. For scale, I am in this photo. Maygen took this photo. I am near her cursor, just in the bottom right hand of the screen, in a bright orange, bright green rain jacket. I guess I don't know what colors are anymore.
It's okay.
So I didn't do yellow mounds. Pinnacles and spires are sort of the heart of the park. This is the like steeply eroding rock formations that this place is really known for. And they are also home to another thing that Badlands is really known for, which is this abundance of mammal fossils. This is one of the best places in the entire world. Look at me when I say the entire world.
South Dakota.
Fossils of mammals when they were first coming to actually dominate the planet in terms of life forms. It's all happening right here. And it's worth noting that although Western science makes a big deal out of all these fossils, and we're delighted, and a lot of museums have Badlands fossils in them, including the American Museum of Natural History and what's the one in Boston? Who's in Boston? Peabody? Is that in Boston?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Great. They also have a lot of Badlands fossils. Geoffrey jumping in with the key information.
I think so. I've been living in DC the last couple of years, so someone will correct us.
You were going too strong.
Yeah.
So Western science loves Badlands fossils, but they weren't the first to recognize the fossils or what they meant. All of those indigenous groups that Maygen mentioned earlier also saw the fossils eroding out of the buttes and realized that they meant that this place was connected to a very different place and a very different time a long time ago. So this is a photo. Oh my God, I have to stop saying that. This is an image
Super
of what the Girl 5 looked like 34 million years ago as the rocks of those pinnacles were being formed. It's an era when Earth is coming to look a lot like we know it today. The Atlantic Ocean is almost as wide as it will be. We're still working on adding California, but it's coming. And the seaway is gone, and Florida isn't there, but that might be okay. In practical terms, what that meant is that the climate of the Earth was really changing as the continents were moving into their current configuration. Ocean currents changed, the climate changed, and what that meant in the Badlands was that instead of the tropical forests that grew the trees Maygen was talking about, we now have sort of this open grassland savanna environment with all these really dope creatures. And I know that you can all see the saber-toothed cat on the left. We're going to talk about it, I promise. But first, I have to tell you about the creatures on the right. This is Mesohippus. It is an early ancient horse. It's about the size of a large dog. And I am 100% obsessed with both it and tiny ancient horses in general. Horses are really dope because they are one of the few animals that are actually native to North America. Many of the animals that we associate with this continent actually migrated in from elsewhere, evolved elsewhere, and came here. But horses are one of our few that we can claim for us. Horses and camels. They evolved here about 55 million years ago, diversified into all sorts of shapes and sizes, and then migrated outwards to Asia. They were extinct.
Can I interrupt you super fast? I just wanted to say that the visitor center at Ben Rifle in Badlands has an amazing like large scale diorama of all of these things from this like hugely successful mammal time. And they have a life-size replica of these horses. And so it's just really like, whoa, that's a little horse. It's really cool. So I just wanted to say that.
That's actually perfect because this not photo is taken from a mural at the visitor center.
Yeah.
That backs those dioramas. Exactly. So shout out to tiny horses. And now let's talk about saber-toothed cats because their fossils are also found here, including this delightful specimen, which was actually found by an 8-year-old girl walking near a visitor center with her family. So not even on a trail or in a less trafficked area of the park, just sort of coming along. It tells you pretty much how prevalent fossils are in the Badlands. They don't look like this when they come out of the ground. They're much more likely to be broken apart and look a little like this. This is a fragment of a jaw and some teeth. Teeth are almost always fossilized black or very dark, so you can see the teeth on the bottom and then a jaw sort of structured towards the back. Here's a little nicer photo that I maybe ripped off the Huff Post. Really nice jaw. You don't often find them like that, but how lovely is that? I often don't talk about jaws like that either. Limb bones are also really common. They look just more like tubes. You'll notice all these fossils, except for the one that the staff member was holding, are in situ. It's important when you do encounter fossils in the Badlands to document them with your phone or a sketch pad, but don't pick them up or move them or do anything like that. So here's a limb bone, and then finally turtle scutes, which is pieces of a turtle shell. Those are the other really common fossils that you might come across in the park. And just all of once you learn to see them, the fossils are literally everywhere here, which is really amazing to me. The Badlands in general, when you're hanging out, you cannot help but be charmed by the way that they look now, and the way that they connect to the past. So they look beautiful, but they contain all of these different stories that do actually connect you to this vast timeline. So at least we found that when you're in the Badlands, or that when we were in the Badlands, we couldn't help but jumping for joy to know all of the amazing things that we could find out about the landscape and all the ways that we were able to actually see these different eras, different situations, and different times. Or, you know, we spent a lot of time also just gazing contemplatively into the middle distance. And even then, all I could do was think about time. What blew me away is that in the scheme of things, this deep time here that we're talking about is actually not even that deep. All of the times that we've described, the seaway and the jungle and the grassland, all happened on December 30th or December 31st on that cosmic calendar. We have barely scratched the surface of what all of this is. And there's still way more to uncover and still more things to see in the landscape that kind of fill in that other time as well. To me, and I think to Maygen as well, that drives a sense of responsibility, knowing that we are part of a much larger narrative, that it actually isn't about us, that this place will continue with or without us, but that we should probably do something to make it not terrible while we're here is sort of the rule. Right, Maygen?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And I think it's important for us especially to remember that this doesn't just have to happen in national parks. It can happen in your own backyard, you know, in the winter, in the summer, it doesn't matter. Just going out into your natural landscapes, wherever you may be, and recognizing the fact that we are the stewards of the land right now, and we owe it to ourselves specifically to take really, really good care of it in order for people to enjoy it. And we are not experts in land stewardship. We are certainly not experts in climate change or climate activism, but the fortunate thing is that we have someone here who is. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That concludes our portion of talking.
Who's the expert?
No, I have some bad news, Geoffrey.
Oh.
You're going to have to swoop in with your knowledge. And it's an honor to be here with you. We're so excited to hear what you have to say. You're a fantastic speaker, and
thank you. Likewise.
We hope you teed it up, or we teed it up okay for you.
Yeah, no, that was.
And thank you, everybody.
That was really brilliant. I guess on behalf of everyone, that was the first time I've seen that talk of yours, and it's very joyous. And I'm not quite sure how I'm going to follow it adequately. I feel like I'm going to be rather depressing by contrast. So everyone hold on to the inspiration that you've just been delighted with. Am I sharing my screen?
You are.
Okay, great. So I guess as was just alluded to, Trish kindly invited me here to sort of take some of this inspiration that Maygen and Emily have treated us to and kind of riff off that and sort of start to ask, bringing us right up to the present, you know, what can we do together to do something to preserve all of this wonder that they've talked about, and specifically how can we confront the climate crisis that is upon us. Since we're talking about deep time, I felt like it might be helpful for me to talk about my own little deep time, just so you know who I am, before I talk about the future and where we might be headed. So, as was said, my name's Geoffrey. I grew up on the south coast of England in the relatively ancient town of Winchester, which is about an hour south of London, right on the south coast, and it was the capital of England about 1,000 years ago. So apparently sort of 1159 or something. So it was kind of during the time of King Arthur. His round table is at the top of our high street. And I've been thinking recently about how growing up surrounded by so much history, it perhaps wasn't entirely surprising that from quite a young age, I found myself repeatedly asking the same question, which was, when I look back, will I have made a difference? And, you know, listening to Emily and Maygen's really beautiful talk, I can really resonate with that sense of deep awe and maybe responsibility, and truthfully, perhaps opportunity too, to do something fulfilling and meaningful with my life. And so for me, science was a natural draw because, you know, as scientists, we're trained to seek out the biggest, most important problems to solve. And as everyone knows, climate change is kind of the mother of all problems. So this really became a guiding question for me and for my life. In fact, it was the opening sentence in my statement of purpose when I applied both to Cambridge, where I studied physics for undergrad, and then MIT, where I did a PhD, working on building the next generation of, you know, ultra thin, ultra lightweight solar cells made out of paper like this, ultra efficient LEDs. This is a demonstration of how they can be more commercially viable if you improve their color. My advisor is the one on the left, by the way, in this picture. But over the last sort of 8 or 9 years or so, since about halfway through grad school, about the time I met Trish, my passion for working at the heart of the climate and energy crisis has also taken me beyond the lab, out of the lab and onto the streets, where I became more and more involved in climate activism, both sort of at local and national levels. And really my work across these different areas has inspired me, you know, through meeting different people with different expertise, to gradually develop some working theories of change for how we can all be most effective in confronting the climate crisis. And, you know, my work has, what I'd really like to do today is kind of share with you the manifestation of that sort of working knowledge. You know, this is sort of my best current theories of change for how we can be effective. And before I kind of launch in, I just wanted to mention that climate scientist Ployat Chikuwasit and we wrote a piece for Mashable 2 or 3 years ago now, kind of really summarizing all this. So if you want to kind of have more links to the things I'm describing, a bit more sort of formal conversation about it, you can find it at this link, bit.ly/climate action guide. So let's jump right in. Our theory of change can really be summarized into 3 parts. And I'd actually like to start at the end, and frankly, at least in our opinion, in the most limited aspect, because frankly, it's the one that most people are drawn to when conversation comes up about how can we be effective. And that is to cut our individual carbon footprints. So generally speaking, the biggest steps we can each take in this regard are to drive less, to fly less, and to eat less beef. And, you know, I personally, I've never owned a car, I've never eaten beef. I obviously have to fly occasionally to go back home to family in England. But, you know, as someone who tries their best to minimize my carbon footprint, of course, this is an important thing to do, and I'd encourage everyone to do it. You know, and especially when it comes, as I put in brackets there, to things like putting solar panels on your roof, because research has actually shown that some of these activities can actually be contagious. And that is particularly important because it can create exponential rather than linear impact, and that's brilliant. However, the reason that I sort of get this theory of change out of the way relatively early on is because, as I said, it has limited potential. One way to see why is to note actually the results of some MIT research a few years ago, which found that the carbon footprint of an average homeless person in America is about 8.5 tons of CO2. That's about 8.5 tons higher than we need to be in order to hold back dangerous global warming. And for context, it's actually higher than the average footprint of a European person right now. The other thing that you may not be aware of is that this notion, which we all talk about, right, of a carbon footprint, was in fact actually originally popularized by none other than BP, the oil company. They did so as part of a $100 million per year public affairs campaign that they ran between 2004 and 2006. For example, they created the first carbon footprint calculator, and they really encouraged through their advertising on TV and newspapers, they encouraged everyone to think about our own individual responsibilities. But as my own research at Harvard and the work of many others is increasingly showing, this wasn't an accident. as explicit denial of basic science became untenable, at least for most fossil fuel companies, not all, they've gradually turned to more subversive, to more veiled forms of propaganda by which to delay action. And one of these, one of the most effective, is to individualize responsibility for climate change, basically to atomize us as a society, sort of demoting us to consumers first and citizens second. And this really siloed form of activism, this sort of third theory of change, is problematic because the climate crisis, as I think most people are aware, is a truly systemic problem, and systemic problems demand systemic solutions. And I'd like to sort of talk a little bit about what I mean by that. Basically, oh, I went too far. Basically, I think it's sort of captured by this concept of the 8.5 ton footprint of a homeless person. What that really demonstrates for us in the sort of most extreme case, sort of ultimate individualized decarbonization, is that most of that 8.5 tons is the reflection of a systemic failure, not an individual one. It's a society-wide failure. We're basically born into a fossil-fueled system. You know, sure, we can buy an electric car, and actually my research and others demonstrates that you absolutely should. You will save some carbon and some cash right now. But as long as most of that electricity comes from coal and gas, we're still emitting too much CO2. You know, we can put solar panels on our roof, we can eat less beef, but without the political, the social, the economic stimuli to make sure that everyone around us is doing it too, the overall impact is rather limited. And so it's for reasons like this that across basically all relevant disciplines, from energy systems modeling to environmental economics to political science, and of course decades of activism and policymaking, all these different fields point to the same conclusion. And that's that we already have the technologies we need to begin addressing the climate crisis. And what we truly lack, where the bottleneck truly lies, is in a lack of political will. And you know, what my work and that of others makes increasingly clear is that one key origin of this bottleneck is the stranglehold of the fossil fuel regime on science-based decision-making in American democracy. And this is something I'd like to dwell on for just a couple of minutes, because I think it can really help shape, at least it's really helped shape my thinking about how we can be most effective. So there's now a vast academic literature, in fact, demonstrating that for decades, American climate politics has really been hamstrung by a well-funded, well-oiled climate denial machine. This is a labyrinth, as sort of demonstrated here, of fossil fuel companies and foundations, think tanks, front groups, and PR firms, all feeding into an echo chamber of politicians and astroturfs and media and blogs, promoting messages of denial and delay. So for example, the sociologist Justin Farrell at Yale has used network analysis to demonstrate that, for example, organizations like ExxonMobil and the Kochs they've demonstrably created what he calls an ecosystem of influence on American climate politics and the public. So Exxon funding, as shown here, for example, has demonstrably increased the quantity and the volume of denial. It's increased its influence, its shaping of denialist narratives, and it's also polarized American opinion. These are all things we can actually empirically now demonstrate. And on top of this, perhaps the most pernicious sort of long-term impact of all of these activities is how it's mutually reinforced populist anti-regulatory ideologies. And the way this works, hopefully if this works, is like this. Basically, profit and ideology drive fossil fuel companies and conservative billionaires to fund anti-science and anti-policy climate denial. And then that, in turn, really foments a sense of public distrust in our most valuable and fundamental institutions, things like science and journalism and democracy and government. And then this reinforces those populist ideologies, and this really vicious cycle ensues. And so we live, frankly, in a more hateful, more divided world. And for sure, the fossil fuel regime's attacks on science and democracy are one key culprit in this sort of unraveling that we're observing. The good news is that these admittedly depressing realizations can in fact point us towards effective action by realizing that what I've just described really teaches us is that the climate crisis isn't just about greenhouse gases, it's also about fossil fuels. It's not just about consumer demand, it's about corporate supply as well. And that brings us to what I feel is probably the most important way for each of us to be effective. This first theory of change, which is to act collectively, to work together to take collective action. So what do I mean by that? Well, the traditional model of power is that it flows down from on high. But to really realize our potential, we have to flip this conception on its head and realize that we all in fact belong to one or more constituencies that have the capacity to either uphold the status quo or to challenge it. And these so-called pillars of support are our most obvious point of leverage. And so what I'd like to do in the next few slides is really just share a few non-exhaustive examples of different types of levers that different constituencies are pulling on, perhaps a sort of inspiration for how we can all engage in our own ways, in our own communities. So for me, mothers are one of the most inspiring groups, especially in their efforts to, for example, the Mothers Out Front organization founded right here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, that have been lobbying for statewide access to clean energy and really mobilizing through a powerful moral force, speaking about the need as mothers to protect their children from this crisis. The children and lawyers suing governments and fossil fuel companies around issues of intergenerational equity are also incredibly inspiring to me, as are frontline communities who are literally blocking fossil fuel expansion day in, day out around the country and around the world. So this photo here is the children and their lawyers from the Our Children's Trust lawsuit, where they got very far, in fact, in suing the US government for denying them the right to a just and stable future. There's actually a film coming out about this very soon. Scientists have also been increasingly, at least some of them, outspoken, finding their voices and organizing together for science-based policymaking. So here I was fortunate to have the chance to help organize the first major scientist protests against the Trump administration's climate and energy policies back in sort of 2016, I guess. This was sort of set the groundwork for the March for Science, which happened a few months later. Everyone, in fact, who holds a bank account also has an opportunity to organize to try to push their banks to stop funding fossil fuel projects like building pipelines. Chase, Bank of England, so on, are massive culprits in this. And this is a highly active area of campaigning right now, if anyone's looking for sort of ways to engage. Young people, of course, have been really leading the way using civil disobedience to push for more effective climate legislation. So some of my friends started the Sunrise movement, who obviously have been nationally impactful in driving this conversation forwards. And everyone from students to pension holders, anyone who basically is a member of an institution that has significant investment, can call on that institution to divest, to de-invest its money from the fossil fuel industry, basically a form of protest that can affect financial, but especially moral bankruptcy on this regime. So again, I was fortunate to help lead the fossil fuel divestment campaign at MIT for several years. And that was how I got involved with Trish and with Radius initially during grad school. Now this one applies to everyone who's American, and it's obviously perhaps the most sacred form of collective action codified in modern democracies, and that is to vote. So as a non-American, all I can really do is implore everyone, anyone who is at least in any way on the fence about voting, about participating, to really reckon with the fact, as we talk about deep time and so on in this panel, is to really reckon with the fact that the consequences of this election truly, and this isn't hyperbole, truly have the capacity to resonate for millennia. It's a hard thing to grapple with, that a four-year term could have such long-scale consequences, but that's the unfortunate reality of irreversible global warming. Now, the trouble, of course, is that not everyone is going to be voting on climate change as an issue. If it's not on their minds, why would they vote on it? And that brings me to the sort of the other and very interrelated theory of change that I'd like to talk to you about today, and that is to end climate silence. The way to really look at this is that, for example, research at Yale shows that most Americans either rarely or never talk about global warming with family and friends. 3/4 of Americans don't hear about climate change mentioned regularly in the media. Just as one sort of illustration of this August, you know, these cable networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, they collectively broadcast 114 segments about the wildfires in California and Oregon. And yet only 5 of those 114, so about 4%, made any form of connection, mentioned climate change. And actually 3 of those 5 were by one guy, one meteorologist. And so the problem right here is that the danger is that silence begets silence. And again, we can really sort of enter into this, what communication scholars call a spiral of climate silence. And this is very problematic because the first step to solving a problem is recognizing there is one. And right now, many people are hardly talking about it at all. So the way out of this mess is to figure out how to talk about it more effectively. And the key again is to reframe the problem, this time as one that is not just a technocratic problem about greenhouse gases, but also a moral problem about fossil fuels. In other words, we need to talk about values. And the reason for that is very simple, which is that there's overwhelming experimental evidence from everything from behavioral science to marketing to remind us that values are the currency of persuasion, not facts, and stories are the medium through which we exchange those values. We can't just talk about what is happening and what needs to happen. We need to talk about why it matters. We need to become better storytellers. And one of the frameworks for storytelling that I often like to encourage people to explore is Marshall Ganz's Self, Us, Now framework. He's here at Harvard, and he's perhaps most famous for using this framework to help Barack Obama develop his 2004 DNC speech that really propelled him to national attention. And this is a powerful and highly learnable and proven formula that you can apply to try to literally tell stories about climate change that are more compelling. And so again, I thought I'd kind of close up with a few examples of how people are using effective storytelling to take climate action. One of my favorite examples is this rock band, what they call Enter Shikari. They're very famous in England and Europe. And they use these global warming stripes developed by climate scientist Ed Hawkins in their gigs to talk to literally tens and hundreds of thousands of people around the world about why climate collapse is personally to them scary as citizens and as musicians. It's a very cool way to break climate silence among this particular demographic. Another profoundly important effort is being led by doctors and nurses who are publicly joining the dots between climate collapse and the immediacy of the public health damages associated with it. So for example, the world's most foremost medical journal, The Lancet, now explicitly recognizes the climate crisis as the greatest public health emergency of the 21st century. And the journal's author has very outspokenly pointed out that doctors have an actual duty of care to engage in nonviolent civil disobedience in order to protect their patients and future patients from climate change. Another example that I've been involved in, along with many other scholars and journalists, is, as Trish sort of mentioned early on, working to try to uncover the history of climate denial and propaganda by fossil fuel interests, in order, again, to tell a different kind of story. And this is a story that hasn't really been told very much for some strange reason I don't quite get, and we're trying to change that. This is a story not just about victims of climate change, but also villains. It's a story that begins to tell Americans about how none of this has happened by accident. You know, Americans' chances of a just and stable future have been sabotaged, really, by a small group of oil executives dedicated, committed to pursuing short-term profits. And no one likes to be lied to. No one likes to be duped. And this is a story that tries to tap into what psychologists call hot cognition, really mobilizing through people through frustration as to what's been done here. And which I'm glad to say, actually, I think has been starting to shift the climate conversation at very high levels. So one case of this was when Anderson Cooper in one of the presidential town halls a few months ago cited our research in pressing Joe Biden on how his White House will hold oil companies and executives accountable. So in closing, I wanted to really point out one other responsibility and opportunity that I believe we all share in talking about the climate crisis, and that is to talk about the intersectionality of this problem, to really craft narratives that hit home the fact that climate justice is also social justice, is also racial justice. And making these connections is so important because it's powerful in tapping into our deepest values and resonating those with those around us. And so to that end, I wanted to leave you with this tweet from an LGBTQ activist called Bron Formation, who just the other day, I just came across this, tweeted about how after RGB died, he was inspired by the words of Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who talked about how in the context of this election, we each have maybe one person, a few people who we uniquely have the capacity to reach out to. And for Brennan, it was his 94-year-old grandmother who always votes Republican. And what he did was, he was very brave, and he basically spoke out to her about how the last 4 years organizing against a government that fundamentally opposes who he is and who he loves has been so difficult and so painful and so scary. And he really shared how he literally broke down in tears when his grandma told him that for the first time in her life, because of him and what he'd shared with her, he this time would be voting for Joe Biden. And I share this story really just to illustrate how right now, at least for the next few weeks, the single most important thing we can all be doing about climate change, in my opinion at least, is to open up to those around us about why we need a president who will fight to protect the people and places we love. And so with that, I just want to say thanks very much for your attention, and I guess we'll see you on the other side of November 3rd, and maybe take some questions if we have time.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey. I'm Thea Keith Lucas. I'm a colleague of Trish Weinman's in Radius, and Trish wants to offer both her thanks and her apologies. The sound went off on her laptop in the middle of the program, so I'm stepping in. But I want to thank you and thank Maygen and Emily for such an inspiring conversation. Certainly hear the word fossil differently after seeing the Badlands as this beautiful record of our deep time of the history of our world. And I think, I don't think I have any right to just grab that and stick it into my car. I'd like to open it now if anyone who's joined us would like to add a comment or a question in the Q&A. We'd love to hear from you. And as we let people gather their thoughts, love to invite Maygen and Emily back into the conversation. What connections do you see?
Well, thanks so much. And thank you, Geoffrey. That was so interesting. We talked a little bit about it in our sort of prep for this, but to hear your whole thing was so fascinating.
Sure.
And I guess what resonates with me is that there's just always a deeper story than the easy narrative. The landscape doesn't look the way that it does by accident. And I mean that both literally and figuratively in this case. There are forces that work on just about everything, and sometimes it can be a little uncomfortable trying to figure out what those are. Certainly like contemplating billions of years versus getting upset about whatever small thing in the present can make you feel a little uncomfortable, but to taking responsibility for places that we all have responsibility for, right? And as Maygen said earlier, it isn't just about national parks. They aren't inherently more special than anywhere else or inherently more natural or, you know, any of that. It's all about trying to see where we are in our everyday lives. I live in Brooklyn. I live in one of the most densely populated places on the planet, but there's the natural world still all around me. in the form of trees, but also in the form of the landscape in which I live. All of Brooklyn and Long Island is a glacial moraine. So like looking for these other features of the landscape, right, there's always something bigger going on. That's what I took out of it.
I appreciated the connection to all of the different stories that we can tell about the climate. And of course, one that resonated for me as a mother was that sense of what are we passing on? Sort of how do we teach? I know that some of the national parks, like petrified forests, have had trouble convincing folks to treat the space and the area with reverence. People are always trying to take those little pieces of wood. I'm curious, in your time visiting national parks, how well do you think that story is told in our shared spaces, that this is shared land and that we have a reverence and a responsibility to it?
No, it's a challenge. I think, to Geoffrey's point about collective activism and just collective action, I think something that we, as visitors of the parks especially, those are our parks. Like, as gross as that sounds, as defined in the federal situation, like, that is our land, right? And if you want to view it from a more, in my opinion, like appropriate way, as human beings, we are responsible to the land. Either way, that does give us, I think, an obligation to police each other and to see something when you say something with regard to irresponsible behavior on the land, which happens constantly. And it's I think probably in conversations we've had with rangers and people who are professionally working on the land, it's something that they constantly are doing, saying, don't do that, you can't go off the trail, you can't take those things, you can't, right? I remain optimistic that as people learn more and as people engage more, and certainly people engage with our indigenous communities, especially who are stewards of the land and think about ways to respect the land and honor the land and think of the people on the land. And as I think we start listening to those voices more, my hope is that that improves as well. It just really depends on where you are. And I think a lot of people feel entitled to just take things. And the story that the people in the parks who are working there often tell is like, if one person does it and then everybody does it, then that has a drastic impact. So if you take one rock from the Acadia National Park shores and then somebody else takes another rock and then everyone just takes another rock, all of these rocks will eventually be gone, which is irresponsible. And so I don't know if that answers the question. I think that people here who visit the parks should simply feel empowered to say, hey, like, I'm in Arches National Park and people are climbing on the arches. Get off of the arch. Like, you can't be climbing on that arch, even though no one's around and no one can see you. That doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. I think as we start feeling comfortable engaging in the land in the safest way possible, otherwise we're not going to be able to visit those spaces anymore. They will simply shut them down or open them up for any number of fossil fuel activities, depending on how the election goes. So I just think it's important to be just really mindful of our ability to kind of confront people when they're doing things that we all know they shouldn't be doing, even though it's very appealing.
Yeah, I will. I just want to tack two quick things onto that, one of which is that regulations and expected behaviors are different everywhere when it comes to national parks. There are some like broad rules, but things tend to be different. So always make sure that you check in at a visitor center or a ranger station to get a park brochure that will tell you all about what you should be on the lookout for and what you can and can't do in the space. And the other is that through our extensive travel, Maygen and I, obviously, as she was giving examples, encountered people removing rocks from seashores or climbing places they shouldn't be. And almost universally, when we approached in a non-confrontational way and said, hey, just want to let you know, that isn't allowed here. This is federal property. So those rocks, those shells, whatever, they have to stay here. People mostly said, oh my gosh, I didn't know, and stopped. So generally, if you give our fellow citizens chances to do good, and if we make those conversations, like expect a conversation when you go onto natural land, that isn't necessarily your home. You don't know all the rules. Go find someone who knows the rules, right? We think about that anytime we go visit somewhere where we aren't from.
Yeah, I hear from both themes that came through from Geoffrey of that our actions are contagious, so we need to choose carefully, and
Right.
also that there's an opportunity for having these non-confrontational conversations that really can change people's behavior, whether it's about this rock or our behavior towards the climate.
Yeah, I mean, so the people at Yale, the team I talked about who do a lot of survey work, they identify what they call the 6 Americas of climate change, and essentially it's through survey work, it's 6 different groups within society you can identify from, if you like, group 6, which is kind of the ardent climate denier, all the way through to group 1, I guess, kind of like me, you know, sort of like the committed activist, and we spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, in organizing, who are you trying to reach out to? Who are you trying to mobilize? And it's a bit like technology. There are first movers in social movements too. You know, when they marched on Washington in the 60s for civil rights, 80% of people said Martin Luther King was, you know, a terrible danger to society and basically was opposed to the activism. And so there is a truth to the fact that a small group of well-organized, you know, well-intentioned people can change the world, and starting there, you see this contagious ripple effect through society. And so it's been so amazing to, and for me, lucky to be part of the climate movement at a time at which finally the message is starting to get through, and we're starting to see a shift in the narratives, and the public and the media starting to pick up now on the urgency of this crisis. So it's been a long time getting here, but yeah, we're starting to see that. So I'm I don't know, Emily and Maygen make me more optimistic than perhaps I usually am by default, so I need more of this.
I've never heard that about myself before, ever, so thank you, Geoffrey.
We have a question from our attendees. Do we need to start in early childhood education to teach respect and understanding of how fragile the environment is? What are your thoughts on how we teach?
I mean, I'm going to be bold and say I think we all probably agree with that statement. I can't see what was actually said. But yeah, I mean, I think anything that you learn at a young age, just like treating people with respect, regardless of their skin color, for instance, or regardless of their gender. I think all of this only is instilled when you're young. It only makes it stronger, right? So it's like a great example from the parks again. If you're visiting the parks with little kids or even older kids, making sure that they understand being stewards of the land, and it's not okay to do just because you're a kid. I know it's fun, but like you can't do the thing. Like we need to be respectful of the land. And you know, I think bringing like environmental education, climate education. I think Geoffrey might be able to speak this more, but in our schools, you know, safely being able to talk about our impacts on the land and the planet, and being able to have some literacy about that really early, I think would only help. And I think we're already seeing that, right? There are kids who are super young who have a much different perspective about the environment and climate change than certainly we did, in terms of like prioritizing recycling, which I actually can't even talk about right now, but you know,
can.
I can't talk about it. But yeah, I think we would only benefit from early education really in any number of things.
Yeah, I mean, I would just second that. I think I'm right in saying that I recently, again, from the Yale people, they do amazing work looking at demographic opinions. I think I'm right in saying that I saw in one of their recent, these are like, you know, population balanced surveys, representative surveys. I think they found that, for example, even in Texas, there's like 2/3 to 3/4 support for young childhood education in the basics of climate science. And yeah, I mean, right, it's well established that establishing that, frankly, just basic understanding early on changes things. And I'm privileged to work with a lot of very, very young climate activists, you know, to have marched through the streets with 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. And it blows my mind. It's to be honest, it's somewhat saddening and sombering, but also very inspiring to see how such young people can be so informed, so infinitely better informed than I was. You know, it took me halfway through grad school to kind of really get switched on and to see the reality of the problem, and obviously have jumped all the way over, sidestepped these questions about the reality, and just be fixated, focused on how can we solve this problem? How can we get these adults out the way and sort this thing out? Is really, I don't like to use the word hope because it feels, it is wrong to just sort of place that burden on, you know, simply on the next generation. But there's a great inspiration there, and I'm really privileged to be able to work with some of them. And so, yeah, beginning that education early on is, in my opinion, vital.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm sorry, just one extra footnote. Usually the way that we know that something is really effective on climate change is to look at what the fossil fuel industry do and usually think about what the opposite effect might have. So climate deniers have been instrumental in propagating denialist textbooks, denialist pamphlets and things to hundreds of thousands, millions of school children around the country, targeted propaganda literally in the form of cartoons, to promote doubt about basic climate science. And so if that's the tack they're taking, you can be damn sure we should take the opposite.
Trish is reminding me that we're a little over 8. So maybe we have one more question in the Q&A, if you guys would be so kind. And it is, what do you think of the UN Sustainable Development Goals? Too little?
Maygen? Emily?
No, Geoffrey, I think you should take that one.
Oh.
Take it away.
Okay. I mean, it's extremely important. I must say that I'm not an expert, certainly not all the different goals. But you know, a bit like the Paris Agreement, it was a monumental step policy-making wise to have codified those ambitions. And I think that the great sort of bounty that comes from it is its holistic approach. So it really tries to ensure that when we're doing work, for example, on clean energy technologies, there is a more capacious approach that also considers things, you know, considers other elements of development, and especially in southern countries. So I don't know. That's a big question, and to be honest, I don't think I have a better informed answer than that. But I think it's certainly a starting point, and one that has motivated an awful lot of good research and policy making. But yeah, if I'm honest, that's slightly outside of my area of expertise. I'd be more opinionated about the Paris Agreement, but I hope that's at least a step in the right direction.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Maygen. Thank you, Emily. There's such a power, I think, in just looking deeply at something, whether it's a landscape or a problem that seems so overwhelming, and really getting in and understanding how it works. I think that sense of deeper mastery alongside the sense that we're responsible for a deep time, I'm finding really inspiring tonight, that if we can figure out about that inland sea, then maybe we can figure out how this climate crisis works. Maybe we can find a way forward together. So thank you so much. It's been really a joy to have you tonight. And I know that Trish offers her thanks and love alongside me.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for having us, and thanks, Geoffrey, for joining us.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks, everybody.
Fun. Now we can all go watch a bunch of old guys yell at each other during a debate.
Don't do it.
Take care, everyone.
All right. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.